So for context, my F29 boyfriend M34 is a doctor. Most of his friends are from work and they all seem to dislike me and act distant, maybe cause I'm not a doctor too? I don't care honestly. Since we started dating they've been asking to hang out without me and they leave any event I'm at. My boyfriend said they're just taking their time to get used to me. Anyways, his B-day was days ago. I'd arranged for the party and paid for everything. It wasn't a surprise since the party was held at the restaurant, and he needed heads up so he could invite his doctor friends. We got there, then his friends started arriving. They came to greet him and started shaking his hand and hugging him while completely ignoring me, though I was there next to him. The tension started when one of them started making remarks about the way I dressed. I sucked it up, but another friend started interrogating me about my degree, then implying I was an ignorant for my food choice. WTF? An hour later another one asked if I could leave because they wanted to discuss work stuff and it's confidential. I was so shocked I laughed, asking why he thought it was appropriate to discuss work during a party, and he replied that I had an attitude. An argument ensued and they demanded that I leave, but I said absolutely not. My boyfriend finally spoke up after it escalated and asked that I keep the peace and go home, but I refused and reminded him and let his friends know that I'd arranged for this party and paid for it and so they should leave since they're just guests. He pulled me aside and begged I go home after they said if I don't leave then they will, but I still refused. They left, all of them, and the party was cut short. My boyfriend was upset and started complaining at home that I ruined his B-day the minute I started arguing with his friends. I told him they were being disrespectful to me, but he said I was wrong too cause they said they wanted to discuss medical stuff and I should have respected that and not made it personal. He's not speaking to me now. I was so hurt I couldn't argue anymore. I felt like I ruined his birthday by making a scene like he said and acting passive-aggressive. Ada? Edit to say that the reason I refused to leave was because I figured they used the medical stuff discussion as an excuse to get me to leave early. My daughter received a bike from her uncle, my brother, on her 11th birthday. She was over the moon and excited to use it because it was on her wish list for so long. Days ago, I discovered that my husband reached out to my brother to ask for the recipient for the bike and returned it to the store and kept the money for himself while my daughter was at school. The bike was at home. My daughter and I got home and she started crying after noticing the bike was gone. My husband was home at the time. He told me he returned the bike and got money in return to spend on something useful for us since the bike was just there as a distraction and there was no need for it now since we're the dead of winter. I was aggravated and lost it on him, saying it wasn't his, didn't come from him, and he didn't pay for it so he had no right to touch it, especially knowing our daughter's been wanting it for a long time and my brother was decent enough to buy it for her despite barely having money to get him by. I told him what he did was theft and insisted he hand over the money to me so I could repurchase it, but he said he spent it on stuff for the house and doesn't have any money left now, but I knew about the money he was stashing away in the bedroom that he forbade me from seeing and I took some of it and went out to repurchase the bike while he was out the next day. He found out and verbally lashed out at me saying I should have never touched the money he was saving for himself, which isn't much, but I lashed right back that I had to so I could repurchase the bike he took from under our daughter. He explained that he didn't keep the money for himself and instead spent it for necessities for our home, but he was at fault for taking the bike in the first place and he was responsible for getting it back. He yelled at me for almost 10 minutes then stormed outside and started smoking. My daughter asked why her dad was upset and that she no longer wants the bike if dad doesn't want her to have it. But I assured her that's not the case and told her she shouldn't feel guilty and to just focus on enjoying her bike. My husband hasn't stopped grilling me about how I disrespected and undermined him and managed to make our daughter hate him after making him look like the bad guy. I again said he shouldn't have touched the bike. End of the story. He's called me thief and juvenile for taking money from his savings and being sneaky about it. Ada for the way I got the bike back. My dad found out my mom was cheating and she won't say with who or when, but we know it's likely around the time she was on a stay-at-home mother. Thing is, she had all of us, 2 brothers 1 sister, around the same time, so any one of us could not be my father's. He's divorcing my mother and wants us to take a DNA test to prove we're his children, otherwise he isn't paying for college for us. He promised to do so before this and all of us have been counting on it. My sister, oldest, did the test because she was confident she was related to our dad. She was likely pre-cheating and she looks the most like him, so I was pretty she was. She's also in college and is relying on our dad, and he's going to keep paying because of the results of the paternity test came back positive. I have a feeling I'm not my dad's biological kid since I don't look anything like him, and people even have commented I don't look like the rest of my family. I'm terrified because I think he's upset enough that he won't talk to me anymore and definitely won't be paying for my college. I don't want to take the paternity test because I don't want to know, but if I don't, I probably won't get college paid for. The money isn't in a college fund but set aside as investments my dad has and isn't going to my mom in the divorce proceedings probably. I don't know how things will go and I'm starting college in September. I stupidly picked a pretty expensive school because I thought my dad would pay for it and he said it was okay, but now even if my mom was willing to, I don't think she can afford it. I'm so mad at her and my dad for putting me in this position. I've told him I'm not doing the test and he said that's okay, but he will assume I'm not his and not have anything else to do with me once since I'm 18 already. I'm living with my mom but not talking to her because of this. Edit. After reading some of the comments, I've decided to do the test. I didn't want to out a fear, but now it's clear it doesn't really matter and it's better, I know for sure. I, 27F, was supposed to get married to my ex-fiancé Mason, 29M, on the 20th of this month. But last week mutual friend caught him cheating on his ex Kim, so I called it off. Because it's so close to our wedding date, I had already booked everything like the venue, catering and everything else. I barely managed to get any money back as it's mostly non-refundable, so in total I've lost $20,000. Last year I took out a loan to cover the costs of the wedding. The longer I take to repay it, the more interest it gets. When we first got engaged, Mason agreed to sharing our finances together, meaning had we got married I would have been able to pay it off. This was supposed to be in our prenup, but because we didn't get married, it meant he no longer had to share finances. I asked him if he was still willing to help and told him that I will go into debt if he doesn't, as I can't repay it alone. He told me it isn't my problem, you took out a loan you can't pay back, and stopped responding after that. When we got engaged, Mason proposed to me with a family heirloom ring belonging to his great-grandmother that was worth $25,000. When we canceled the wedding, he told me he wanted the ring back, but we never got around to arranging a time he could pick it up. Because I don't want to go into debt, I told him that if he didn't agree to help pay it off, I wanted a lawyer involved, that I would sell the ring. He didn't reply and ignored the messages. However, after talking to a mutual friend, Jake, I found out he had actually read the messages and told everyone he didn't care because I wouldn't do it. I asked Jake to tell Mason that if I don't get a message from him in the next 24 hours that I would sell the ring. Jake told me he again said he didn't care and didn't think I would do it. So the next day I sold the ring to an online website and messaged Mason to tell him it had been done and told him he shouldn't have underestimated me. He started cussing me out, saying I didn't scare him and that he would be around for the ring later. True to his word, he came to my house demanding the ring and I told him I sold it already and showed him the proof. He blew up at me, saying I was a petty bitch and that I shouldn't have sold it because it wasn't just a ring, it was an heirloom that meant a lot to his family. A lot of my family members think I overreacted and shouldn't have gone to extreme measures, as it will be hard for him to get the ring back, if he even can at all. Ada for selling his great-grandmother's ring? My, F36, children's, M12 and F9, father, M43, passed away after a long struggle with cancer 3 weeks ago. His death was expected and the kids knew their dad was very sick, but still, I couldn't get them ready to handle this kind of event. Their mental and physical health is my one top priority, and I want them to grieve their dad properly. My current husband, M37, saw no need for the kids to attend the funeral after I said they were going with me. He said they're still young, but I said they had every right to be there for the final goodbye. He suggested he go with us then, and I wasn't sure, but I contacted my former in-laws and they said it was fine. My husband drove us to the funeral and kept making comments to the kids telling them how to behave, which was uncalled for. We got there and I brought the kids to stand near their grandparents, while my husband kept introducing himself to strangers, then went to stand next to the kids. I was standing from a distance but could hear the kids crying. I then started hearing my husband telling them to quiet down repeatedly. Not gonna lie, I felt bothered, wishing he'd stop. While the kids were crying he loudly said, "Stop crying, really there's no need for this ... It's not like he can hear you," and the kids just started sobbing at this point. I was stunned. I looked and saw my in-laws staring at me. I felt horrible. I walked up to him and whispered I needed a minute with him. I made sure we were away and lost my temper asking what he was doing. He said he was just trying to comfort the kids and help them get a hold of their emotions. I told him what he said was horrible and everyone heard it. He tried to argue that he was just trying to help, but I said he had no right to tell the kids how to grieve their father and demanded that he leaves the funeral, but he threw a fit and said I was overreacting. I insisted, then he left later. After the funeral the kids started avoiding me. They wanted to stay with their aunt and I went home by myself and found my husband there waiting with an angry look on his face. He picked an argument saying I shouldn't have kicked him out of the funeral after he came to support me and the kids, but I told him what he said made the kids refuse to even come home with me. He said the kids are using him as an outlet for their anger after he's been generous with his time and effort, and this is how we repay him? By making him out to be the bad guy? I refused to keep going, but he kept pushing for an apology for this blatant disrespect I showed him. For more details / my husband never had a good relationship with my children's father. I was confused when he said he wanted to come to the funeral, but then I thought he did it for the kids. Long overdue update here. So, since my first post, things have been chaotic. I moved in with my aunt and have had the opportunity to be an actual teenager for once in my life. She's been letting me go out with friends, cooks the majority of the home meals, is my shoulder to cry on. But unfortunately, things haven't been all good. About 2 weeks or so after I moved in with my aunt, my mom showed up at the door with all 4 siblings in tow. She looked a mess, if I'm going to be honest, and my mother has always been a very put-together woman, so I was kind of worried. She said she'd tried but she couldn't do it, she wasn't cut out to be a mother. She begged for me to come back. The kids also looked miserable. The 7 meters and 3F were clinging to me, the baby was crying and 10 meters was just silent. He's usually a huge chatterbox. I told her I was not coming back, but my aunt repeated her offer to take in all of us on the condition that they had no more children. My aunt is a well-paid woman who's always wanted children but wasn't able to have them biologically and felt like we were close enough to hers anyways. She has a fairly large house already but has said she'd move if need be. My mom just broke down. She said she didn't want to give any of us up, but she just couldn't be who we needed her to be. She admitted that her and my dad were considering a divorce and I encouraged her to seek some professional help. In the meantime, my siblings are staying with us. We collected the majority of their belongings and my aunt has hired a nanny to be with us when she can't be. My father has gone NC and the last we heard my mom was seeking therapy and having supervised visits with my younger siblings. Despite her trying now, I just cannot forget all those years I lost because she wasn't cut out to be a mom. I can't get over how many times I broke down over how stressed I was. I still love her, but I can't let her be my mom now when she wasn't when I needed her most. So, not all sunshine and rainbows, but some progress was made. Thank you everyone for all the advice and support. I am also in therapy thanks to my aunt and beginning my own healing process. I hope you all had a great Christmas and a wonderful New Year's.